So I had a revelation with this morning. We're just going to read the first couple of verses. So they brought the ark of God and set it inside the tent which David had pitched for it, and they offered burnt offerings and peace offerings before God. When David had finished offering the burnt offerings and the peace offerings, he blessed the people in the name of the Lord. So what went through my mind was how it was credited to Abraham as faith, right? And so back then they did these burnt offerings to atone for their sin, right? They believed, God says, if we do these burnt offerings, we will be forgiven for our sins. And they had faith in that. So even back then they had faith before Jesus ever came. So everything's always on faith, right? So they do these offerings, they have faith that they'll be forgiven for their sins. And so I looked it up just to make sure it was right. And yes, they did it for their sin. And it says, the burnt offering was a way to express devotion to God. It was a way to gain God's acceptance. And it was a way to repair the relationship between the offerer and God. Now we know, since Jesus came, if we have faith, what we're doing is we're saying, I believe that Jesus died for my sins, and that when I accept that and I acknowledge that I need that atonement of his death, then we're having faith and we are brought into the family of God. And then instead of doing burnt offerings, we're sacrificing ourselves, right? It says to die to self. The reason we die to self is because then we are made into a new creation. And in John 15, it says to remain in God so that he will remain in you. And we do that by having faith, by following him, and by listening to him when he tells us certain things, and we die to self. So it was about faith back then with burnt offerings, and it's about faith now with dying to self.